Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Wednesday video where I answer your questions. Every week, people ask me questions and they put it in the comments below. You can do the same. and I answer the questions the following week. There's one question in here that's a bit political. I'm going to answer it. I always try to give my honest feedback to any question that's asked. Sometimes, though, people can't handle my honesty. I get into trouble. So that I'll leave that question to the end. The rest of the questions are pretty tame. So, but some pretty cool things that I will be showing and talking about. So stay tuned for that. So first question comes from K. Munin. Stephen showed off some of the books from your Kickstarter. Are there any particular characters you would have liked to have had been part of this project that did not have the opportunity to do so, that you did not have the opportunity to do so? One of the characters I really wanted, and we just kind of wanted to play a little safe on the first issue of the comic, was Phantom Lady. Phantom Lady is kind of one of those characters that she's in the public domain, but not in the public domain. So it's kind of one of those weird borderline ones where if you use her kind of representation from like the Golden Age, then you're fine. If you use her modern, they reinterpreted her. They made her with a yellow costume and green collar. That interpretation you're not allowed to use because DC will sue you out of existence. So as long as you use the Golden Age version, you're supposed to be okay. But you know, it's one of those ones where would DC go after you? Maybe, I don't know. So we wanted to play a little safe on the first issue. Now there was another one that's also a DC character, I believe, and that's Blonde Phantom. Actually, Blonde Phantom's Marvel. Sorry, Marvel. And that was another one we were a little bit shady on, you know, whether or not we should use. Like, we were a little bit nervous about using that character. I would have liked to use either of those characters. Also, I'd like to have Betty and Veronica, like personally, but I know not to touch because they're not public domain and they will get me into trouble. But those are the kind of characters I would have liked to have used. Now, the second issue of the comic is going to be, you know, we're going to be start showing some of the stuff for it soon, probably in the month or so, maybe May, I believe, is when we're going to kind of start ramping things up. And I already have some preliminary artwork from the artists, and that will include Phantom Lady. Actually, I am going to sneak her in, and it's going to include some more characters. Like, my goal is to really highlight all the female characters from the Golden Age and show them all. That'd be my goal. And probably to do that, it's going to take like 3 or 4 comics to do. So that's my goal. Next question comes from Eric Casagrande. If you could start all over again, would you change anything or do anything different in regards to how you collect comics? Well, if I knew the future, you know, it's one of those things. If you know the future, I saw some of the prices for a Golden Age stuff in the 90s, like what it was going for, and I was buying stuff that probably was modern, like modern at that time, that was similar price to the Golden Age stuff. The Golden Age stuff really wasn't that valuable at the time, and I really I'm kicking myself for not picking up more Golden Age at that time. Instead of some of the crappy 90s stuff that I picked up. I picked up a lot of Drek from the 90s. And I kind of regret that because, you know, the amount that I was paying in the 90s was higher than they even sell for now. Like, I remember some books, you know, being $5-10, which doesn't sound like much. But when the cover price is only $2, that's, you know, you're paying over cover. And those same books still are maybe $5, $2 to $5. You can actually get them pretty cheap. So I feel kind of like, oh man, I missed out on an opportunity where I could have picked up some cool Golden Age book that was a fraction of the cost that it is now. The one that I saw that was really cheap was Venus 19. And you could have picked up Venus 19 back in the 90s for maybe $50. Like just, and now it's like a $5,000 book. So there's things like that. Just, I feel like there, I missed out on certain opportunities. I just didn't know. Like, it wasn't like that I wouldn't have been interested in them, or there just wasn't, they weren't available, first of all. Like, it wasn't like it is now where you can search multiple places. And really, it was hard to find that stuff. So I wish I could have had access to some of that Golden Age stuff. And I wish that I could have been able to buy it at those prices, and instead of some of the junk that I bought instead. Because I have literal long boxes, maybe I would say 4 long boxes filled with junk, 90s junk. That just isn't valuable, will always be dollar bin stuff. And I kind of regret that. So, because I paid way more than $1 for them. But yeah, so that'd be the only thing that I would change. I'm pretty happy with my collection for the most part. But I would have liked to have gotten it cheaper. Okay. Next question comes from Toxic Pelican. You're in, like, this is like a hypothetical question. You're in a rundown, deserted home. You happen upon a steamer trunk inside some vintage comics. Lo and behold, you find Action 1. First Superman in good condition, maybe as good as 5065. Will you send it to CGC to have it graded, or add it to your collection and keep it in raw format? And if you send it in, what would be the cost of grading? It is my understanding that a comic like this, their fee is based on value. Will you keep it or succumb to the temptation to sell it? Okay, so I would love to keep the book. It's like one of those things where, when is the opportunity to find something like this again? Probably never. Like, that's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Now, I'm kind of like, I'm one of those people that is very analytical in the way I think. Like, I think of like, okay, what would be the best scenario where I'd get what I want? Okay, so probably what I would do is I would send it to Heritage. Now, if I sent it to CGC, that they charge 4% of the market value. Okay, 4%. That's a lot of money. when you look at between a 5 and a 6, they can go for anywhere from $3 to $4 million. Okay, so let's say $3 million for this book. Well, $3 million and 4% of $3 million is $120,000. I can't afford that. I would be like broke just because I have this book in my collection. So what I would do is send it to Heritage. Now, Heritage, when they get something that big, they send it to CGC. They probably get some special rate or something, but then they would sell it for me. And when you sell a high valued book like that, they actually negotiate on their premiums. And the reason I'm doing all this is, my thought is, what they would do is they would sell it. They get like, maybe I'd get $2 million at the end of the day from all the fees and all that kind of stuff. Maybe $2.5 million, maybe on the good side. Now, with that, I then buy a restored copy of Action 1. I would still want the book, which maybe would cost about $500,000. And I would use the other $2 million to buy cool stuff, or pay off loans, or pay off whatever, something. I do something with the money. So that's the kind of practical way I think. I think very analytically rather than emotionally. I even though I love the book, I would still want it, but I'd figure a way to get it again, but not have to, but still get the money, or not have to pay out some crazy amount of money. So that's the way I think. I hope that answers your question. But 4%, it's crazy how much they charge. I mean, does it take any real more effort than to get like just any random other book rated? Now, part of that 4% is justified in the respect that they do have to get insurance for it. So part of that 4% is that insurance of the book, that they are protecting you from potentially the book getting lost or stolen. So that's part of it. Okay, but still, it's too much. Okay. Fiddle Chips wrote, "Hi, Alan. I've been talking to some collectors many started during COVID, and I'm shocked how they view the hobby, constantly checking GPA, obsessing over the money they lost because of the price drops, and they buy books with a chip on their shoulder. In my opinion, this is no way to collect. I wanted to ask you I wanted to ask you if you notice this in the hobby. I always enjoy hearing your opinions." Um, what you're describing is actually the way I see Sticky Goose. Sorry, I don't mean to pick on that guy, but I feel like he is the embodiment of this question, because he is somebody that went all in during COVID. He bought a whole bunch of books. I just saw a video recently by him where he showed that he spent $10,000 in grading costs on all these books, and he cracked them all out. He just wasted $10,000. Really dumb in my opinion, but he is kind of the epitome of COVID, the COVID collector. And the COVID collector is somebody who, a lot of people bought comics during COVID for two reasons. One, there was the nostalgia. They were like, "Oh, I miss comics. I have, this miss of comics, and I'm getting all this money from the government for sitting at home. Why not buy some comics? Like, why not do something?" There was that nostalgia that I think happened. And there was another thing that happened during COVID where it almost felt like the end of the world. Like, this might as well spend it all. They just go crazy. And there was also the hype. That was sort of the peak Comic Tom era in the way where people are just, oh, I'm going to buy this book and flip it for $1 million the next day, right? Keep on flipping it for double. It was kind of a crazy time. And that whole mindset is very much summed up in a person like Sticky Goose, who really got bummed out when the comic market tanked. And, it's the typical bubble experience. Like, when you put everything into something, and it seems like it's just going to keep on going. And then all of a sudden it just bursts, and you're left holding the bag, and you're like, "Oh man, I paid all this money for these books, and now they're worthless." And it makes you feel like you associate that feeling to not just the books that you lost on, but other books, the entire hobby. And I think a lot of the people that collect that way really don't understand the hobby. They don't understand that this is a bubble of many bubbles. There will be other bubbles. Like, this is not the first bubble. There's actually a buyer's bubble that's, I think, is about to burst right now, where you can get books really cheap, and it's like, "Oh, wow, I can always get books really cheap. They will always be cheap." Like, that's the kind of bubble that's happening right now. And it's going to be the opposite, where all of a sudden people are going to be like, "Well, no, there's no books to buy. There's just no inventory because nobody's willing to sell at those low prices anymore." And people are holding their books, and the prices will start going up. And all of a sudden people will be like, "Oh, I missed out," So, there's different bubbles that happen, and, things go up, things go down, but the general trend, if you're sort of a more seasoned collector, is an upward trend. And it's generally what happens. And if you look at even the market, like, if you watch my Saturday videos, not Saturday, but Monday videos with Mark, I talk about this all the time, that if you just cut out the COVID peak, you actually see a very traditional market that's gradually going up. It's like, okay, this is normal. That's kind of the way comics work. It's a good long-term investment. They go up in value, and generally they hold their value. There's stuff that, one thing that did happen in COVID, and I have to really talk about this, and because I don't want people to think, "Oh, you can buy anything and it'll go up in value." That's not the case. What happened during COVID was people were speccing, and they were speccing on crap. They were speccing on things that were just, there was nothing there. There was just nothing to really justify that book being valuable. Like they would spec on some character that might, walk past in the background in some movie. Well, that is not a good long-term spec. Um, that book, a dollar bin book, goes up to $100. Well, obviously, it's not going to maintain that kind of value. So, so I think that was one of the mistakes that happened during COVID. People were kind of overly valuing books. Um, but if you buy what are called blue chips, where these are books that have value and have characters that, people recognize and kind of know now and will know 20 years from now, then you're probably safe. You're probably okay. Um, that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they go all in on something that who cares? Nobody cares about. They don't even care about it. So that was one mistake. And I see somebody like Sticky Goose kind of doing that where, or I don't want to pick on him, but I mean that kind of collector that they come in, they listen to a bunch of bad advice, and then they buy accordingly, rather than buying what they would think is a good book, and they, hear other people talking about as a good book. Like, it's not rocket science for the most part. Buy something that, is rare. Buy something that you like. Buy something that has a cool cover. Buy something that has a cool character. And that's it. A cool story. Those things. If you do all that, you'll probably do okay in the long term. So that would be my advice about that. And also, I think it is a bad way to collect, is just to be focused on what the GPA says or whatever. I think a much better approach is to look at what I just described. Also, like I do look, like personally, I do like looking and seeing how my investments are doing. Like these are investments in theory. It just, there is that kind of pride of ownership of when the value goes up. I have to say that I'm guilty of that myself, but I don't let it run my life. If a book goes down, I'm like, I still love the book, and I know that long term it will go back up again. It's just a matter of time, and I'm not selling it anytime soon. So that's a much better way to collect. So that'd be my opinion on that. Okay. Kim Nguyen wrote, Alan, do you feel that the comic book prices are squeezing out the younger generation? With today's prices, it is the same or higher compared to the 1970. Well, obviously, comics are not affordable for kids. Like, let's look at 1970. Okay, probably the average kid was getting maybe 50 cents for an allowance. I don't know. I don't know what you would get in 1970. That was before my time. But I remember as a kid, I would get $1 a week as an allowance. Okay, that was back in late 70s, early 80s. $1 a week, that was my allowance. Maybe, and it was up to $2. I remember going, oh, $2. Oh, that's so big money. It's like huge money. And now I think kids are getting maybe like $10 to $20. Okay. So in those numbers, okay, so back in that time period, comics were maybe 20 cents to 25 cents, maybe 35 cents. So with $1, you're getting 3 comics. Okay. With $2, you're getting like 6. Okay. That's a fair number of comics that you can buy with your weekly allowance. Now with $20 nowadays, and I think that's on the high side what people would get, you can get maybe three comics as well. Okay, now it just seems like comics are more expensive. Like the average book price is around $6 to $7. It seems a little high compared to the 35 cents. Maybe it's maybe a mindset, just the number's bigger, but it seems like the price of comics proportionally to how much everything else has inflated seems disproportionate. It seems like things have gone up way more in terms of comic prices than compared to when I was a kid. Compared to everything else when I was a kid. Like, you'd have to, look at some chart to see how much was milk, how much was a comic, how much was like, all the different prices and compare. But from my gut feeling, I feel like comics are 2 times more expensive than they really should be in terms of that price. What would be a comfortable price for kids to pay? Maybe even 3 times more. That's just a gut feeling. So I think if the comics were around $2, that would be kind of that no-brainer level for kids, and I think kids could enjoy comics more. Now, how does that happen? The only way for that to happen is comics need to put ads into the comics that kind of balances off some of the cost. And comics have to also find ways to cut costs, really. And I'm not sure how they can do that. It's like that's really asking the comic book industry what would be the best way to save money. But I think that's where there is that bit of pushing out of the younger generation. I think a bigger thing that is pushing the kids out of the comic book, shopping space, I guess, would be not just the prices of comics, but the content of the comics, that they're just not geared towards younger kids. I think one of the mistakes that happened during the 90s was they really came up with this mentality that comics were not for kids anymore. They were for adults. And they sort of kept that same attitude all the way until now, where they really geared comics for an older generation. I think that's a mistake. I think they really need to kind of gear the books to the kids. Now, the funny thing is, I say all this, but I know kids are buying like Dogman and all these other books. They're books, and they're about the same price or higher. Like they're actually more like $10 to $15 per book, and they buy those. So as I said, it might be less about price and more about the content. That'd be my opinion on that. Just end with that every time. Now, next question. I like what I buy. What's the production run for Evil Ernie #1? Well, it was around 12,000. That's an easy question. Does the low print run make this book valuable? No, it doesn't. Evil Ernie, well, it does partly, I should say. But Evil Ernie #1 is the first appearance of Lady Death. And Lady Death was super popular during the 90s, super popular now. Brian Pulido is like one of those, guys that is constantly pumping up Lady Death, constantly promoting it, and has a very loyal fan base. So there's a lot of people that love that character. I love Lady Death. I actually picked up Evil Ernie #1 and 2 from the 90s, back in the 90s. So there's my copy of Evil Ernie #1. It's mint. It's like a really nice copy. I gotta get this graded at some point. But it's a mint copy. And this is the first appearance of Evil Ernie and first appearance of Lady Death. Now, there was some Malibu previews that were earlier, to tell you the truth, but this is the first full appearance, I guess. So yeah, Evil Ernie. And then Evil Ernie #2, and this is the one that a lot of people chase after, is the first cover appearance of Lady Death. That's why it's a big book, because it's the first cover appearance of Lady Death. And you can see why she was instantly popular with young men. Just a really sexy character, really fun character. If you like zombies and sexy girls, well, you'd love Evil Ernie. So I actually really enjoyed Evil Ernie as a kid. Well, when I was in university. And I really liked Lady Death. So, yeah. I think that's what makes it valuable. Just that desirability of the character. That people really like to get that first appearance of Lady Death. And Evil Ernie is also kind of a unique character that people do like as well. So, cool character, always going to drive the price up. Okay, next question comes from MJ Chick. When will Marvel and DC get the message? That's referring to the idea of them just focusing on making good stories again. I think they are. In the last question, I kind of addressed this more, and I will get into that more. So just wait on that question. Now, you asked one more question. What is your opinion of facsimile comics, such as like Detective 1, Detective 31, Superman 1, Batman 1, Detective 27? I personally like them. I like them to a certain extent, and I hate them in a certain extent. So one of the things that is good about them is it does give people the opportunity to read a book that might be otherwise unattainable. Like, getting an Action 1, I just talked about how expensive they are. Well, not many people can get that, right? Not many people can afford it. And there's not that many copies to get, even if they did want it or could afford it. So that, getting those stories out to people, I think is a good thing. Now, it does negatively impact the value of those books. So the weird thing is the reprints do kind of kill the value of the first print. It is a fact. I mean, the amount it kills the value is questionable, but it does hurt the value because you got that option. Whenever you have options, it reduces the value when you have less options. This is the way it works. So that's one negative aspect of facsimiles, but I do like them in terms of giving the accessibility to more people, and more people can enjoy those great stories and covers and stuff. So yeah, that part of it I do like. Okay, next question comes from Comic Book Ninja. What are some of your favorite comic book related movies and TV shows from the last 2 years? Okay, I really had to think about this one because it's actually a hard question for me. Like, I would say anime. Like, I kind of like anime mostly. I did start watching the Daredevil series, and I thought it was okay. A little bit boring. Sorry. I thought it was a little slow. And yeah, so that was okay. I didn't mind the Shazam movie, like the Shazam newer movie. I really liked the Flash movie. So the Flash movie was really good. And if I was going to say back to the anime part, I was going to say Solo Leveling. I really love that TV series. It's on second season right now. I just finished the second season. Really great. I really enjoy that. And that's actually from the comics. There's a free comic book day that features the first appearance of Solo Leveling. So recommend you pick that up. But in terms of other things, I would not say any Star Wars. So Star Wars, I think, was hopeless. I really didn't see anything in Star Wars that I would say is good. I heard I didn't watch it though. I heard that the what's the series called? There was one series that was supposed to be good. The one that predated the whole Star Wars, the first episode of A New Hope. It was supposed to be like that story before A New Hope. That one supposedly did well. But I haven't watched it, so I heard they're making a second season too, but I didn't watch it, so I don't know. But other than that, I did like the Flash movie, and probably not many people would agree with me on that, but I did enjoy the Flash movie. I thought it was good. There really wasn't that many good superhero movies. I have to struggle to find one. There's actually one that I thought was good. It was with was it Sylvester Stallone? I want to say Sylvester Stallone, where he is a superhero. I think it's Sylvester Stallone. And basically what happens is he's a twin. There's evil version and a good version of him. And through the whole movie, you think that you're working with the good version of him, because one of them died, and you think you're dealing with the good version of him, but then it really is, he's actually the bad guy. But he kind of reformed in a way. I don't know. It was actually a good movie. But I forget what it's called actually. But that was actually okay. The one that I don't remember the name of. That's how bad I remember names. But yeah, that was actually okay. But there really hasn't been. I have to say, like, pretty much most of the Marvel and DC stuff have been terrible. Just really annoyingly so. Especially Star Wars. Oh, Star Wars is horrible. But yeah, so those would, as I said, there was not that much bright stuff in the last 2 years. But I'm hoping they will, recover and start making good movies. I'm really looking forward to Superman, and I'm looking forward to Fantastic Four. So, yeah, that's all I can say. But the next question really gets into it a bit more. Next question comes from Chick Sartorio. I think that's Sartorial, maybe Sartorial. I don't know. It's somebody else's name. Okay. Chicks Artorial. I think it's Chicks Artorial. There's no breaks. It's just a bunch of letters. So, Chicks Artorial. Aha, that makes sense. I'd like to hear more about Marvel getting rid of its DEI and activist culture. You said it's a good idea. Why specifically? It seems like politics. So this is the question that I kind of don't really like to answer because so many people get so offended. I don't know why people have to get offended. Just people can have different opinions. And I'm going to tell you my opinion, but I just want people to be a little bit chill. Just chill. Okay, but here's my opinion on it. So I'm not a fan of DEI. Okay, so if you look at the definition of DEI, sounds great. It's the whole idea that you recognize people that have been historically marginalized. Sounds like a good thing. However, what it really is not that. That's what it sounds, so it says one thing, but it really is another thing. It's a sort of like, like net neutrality sounds like a good thing, but it's actually evil. I'm an internet guy, so I know. It's like sounds, they put names to things that sound good, but really actually are the total opposite. So with DEI, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, it sounds good. Diversity sounds like, more availability of option, more options. Equity is actually not such a good thing. It's more, equity is taking one thing from one group and giving it to another group, like unjustifiably, it's like theft in my opinion. Inclusion just means acceptance. But inclusion can be exclusionary, which is weird. Often, so one of the things, here's a good example of DEI and how it can go horribly wrong. When they created the new Snow White movie, which pretty much everybody can agree is a horrible movie, one of the things that they did was they listened to Peter Dinklage. And Peter Dinklage was saying, hey, I think that, this whole idea of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves is demeaning to dwarves. He kind of put that out there. And what happened was, as a result, they didn't want to put dwarves in the movie. Well, it's seven. Literally, the name of the title is seven dwarves, right? So there was a lot of backlash because they had these androgynous characters, like just like random people. They had a woman, they had a black person, they had like a whole bunch of diversity. They try to have it all. They had a gay thing, they had a dwarf even. Like, let's put random people. And they try to like cater to all the different groups. Okay. Now that there was a photo that was released of those 7 people, and that spurred a huge amount of backlash. And so they realized, okay, we got to have the dwarves. But then they still had this mindset, oh, DEI, we got to be careful. We don't want to upset anyone. So they didn't actually allow the voices of those dwarves that are CGI dwarves to be um, voiced by actual dwarves. So actual dwarves weren't allowed to voice dwarf voices because they didn't want to offend dwarves, real dwarves that could be offended somehow by playing dwarves in a movie. Again, doesn't make any sense, but it's them trying to be overly sensitive and politically correct in a way that ends up discriminating against the very people that they're trying to help. So what ended up happening was actually the Dwarves Actors Association sued Disney. It's crazy stuff. But that's what happens. They were being deliberately discriminated against in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's why I'm sort of against that culture, for example. That's a good example. Where, and if they just said, okay, let's not even worry about DEI, let's not worry about all this stuff, let's just make a good movie. They would have hired 7 dwarves who would love to have played the part because it's a classic movie. They probably would have loved to play the part. They could have acted, and people would actually say, hey, look, dwarves are kind of cool. They would see them and they would just say they're kind of cool. Like, I was a big fan of Willow, and that had a whole bunch of dwarves in it. And like, I didn't think, oh, they're so, I looked down upon them because they're little people. I just saw them as people that were smaller and cool in their own way. And they had limitations, but they would rise above those limitations. I just saw them as cool. When they start thinking about all this stuff, it actually works against the very people that they're trying to promote. And I think that's where the DEI culture kind of goes wrong. So yeah, so focus on good movies, focus on good stories, and you'll be fine. So that's why I think Marvel was horrible for this. It would take a traditional male white character and convert it to non-traditional female, gay, lesbian, something, like some mix, some weird thing. And they would push like everything into that character to try to level up character. I'm really blanking on words today. Bring people up that were previously discriminated against. And I think in doing that, what happened was people can sense it. Like, well, not just sense it, it's pretty bloody obvious. Where if you take a character that everyone perceives a certain way, and then you try to race switch them or sex gender switch them, people get offended by that because they love the original character. Now, that is, to me, bad on 2 fronts. One, you piss people off because they want to see their traditional character being on, shown on screen. And 2, what you've done is you've demeaned the very person that you've put into that place. Because what you said is, well, I'm too lazy to write a good story about this new character or new person. Like, why not make a new black character? If you really want a black character to be in the movies, well, make a new movie with a black character. Black Panther, all black people, did really well. Did really well. Nobody had a problem with that. Okay, so make more stories like that. Obviously they can do well. Do that. Don't switch out characters that are traditionally one way or the other, and in order to just inject diversity into movies. One of the things that really was annoying was they were hiring people that were not necessarily qualified for the jobs, just based on their skin color. That's racist. Okay, don't do that. Again, let them. And the thing is, when you hire somebody that is not necessarily skilled, where they haven't earned their way to get to that position, what you've done is you put them in a position where they're just destined to fail, and you're going to lose money as a company, and you're going to make that person look bad because they didn't have the experience that they needed to do the job. And everyone's going to be like, oh, well, obviously that was a diversity hire. And they're going to think, well, maybe all people that are black or whatever are inferior because look at how they failed on this one project. It actually works against the very initiative that you're trying to do, which is to promote people, to elevate is the word I was trying to say, elevate them. Well, you're actually doing the opposite. You're demeaning them because you're giving them opportunities that they haven't deserved, and that can really backfire. Just there are like what you do is just be colorblind. That's the old term. That's the old way of doing it. Just let the good people, if they're really good at writing or really good at acting or really good at whatever, and it doesn't matter what their color is, just if they're good at what they do, let them rise to the top, and they will. They will rise to the top. Like meritocracy does work, and just allow people that have skills to rise to the top. And I can assure you that they will rise to the top. This whole idea, that's another activist part of this whole DEI thing, was that they didn't believe in the very people that they're trying to promote. And I've seen lots of really talented people, and doesn't matter what their color is, rise to the top. And, if they're talented, they will rise to the top. And it's only when you have this kind of negative expectations of these people that you have to do this kind of bogus stuff where you put them into it just because you have to put them into it. Another thing that I didn't like about DEI, and I could go on about this a lot because I really get annoyed by it, is that one of the things that happened was, and this really happened in the recent, speaking of recent movies, in the recent Thor movie, where I can't remember the name of the Thor movie. That's so bad. It's just that I almost want to blank it out of my memory. Where you have they show Asgardians, I should say. And when you looked at Asgardians, they should be Norwegian, that kind of Norse look. Okay, white, blonde, typical Norwegian look. Okay, and that's because they were isolated. Okay, they it's not like nowadays where everybody's mixing and all that kind of stuff. They were isolated, and so you expect people to be very homogeneous. Okay, but when they showed it in the movie, it was like the United Nations. It was like a mixture of everything. There was black Norwegians, there was Chinese Norwegians. There was, I was like, okay, well, they don't look very Norwegian. And it takes you out of the realism when you see that kind of diversity for diversity's sake. It'd be like, and they never do it. They only do it when it's a white group. They never do it when it's a black group. If they showed like Nigeria and they showed like, Asians and all this mixture and all this kind of stuff, that wouldn't be very realistic. People would be like, well, this is not Nigeria. Nigeria is 99% black. There are Asians there, by the way. But for the most part, they're mostly black. So the point is, people, want to see things that are realistic. And that's why you can't just race swap all the time. It really does take out the realism of the situation. I think finally Marvel has gotten out of it. One thing I'd like to add to this is specifically the hatred that I noticed within a lot of the DEI stuff was a lot of the time they would not only elevate some, usually a female, usually a black female, but they would do it at the expense of other characters. So often they would say, "Oh, she is the smartest," and they wouldn't. They would say it. They wouldn't show it. They would say it, and they would say, "Oh, but he is like just a dumb white guy." Like they'd make Thor a bumbling idiot, and they'd make Riri this awesome girl. Like that kind of method of elevating these diversity hires, basically. And I think that really, really makes people feel negative about it. Again, a lot of the stuff, if you make people feel negative about it, then people will generally feel negative about not just, especially when it is race related or gender related. If you do it in such a way that people feel negative feelings about those races or genders, well, what you're doing is you're tearing people apart rather than building bridges and building people together. It's just so frustrating. It's like, like I remember, watching Blade. I didn't need to see a white Blade guy. Blade's a black character, and I was perfectly fine with that. I thought he was like kick-ass. He's awesome. Like he's just so cool, and I really enjoyed it. And I pretend to be, I try to, pretend to be Blade, even though I'm white. Oh, somehow that's bad. But the point is, I could appreciate the character. I didn't need to see myself, physically represented on screen. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of these diversity, equity, inclusion people think, that they, we have to represent everybody, and in the end you represent nobody, because nobody can relate to those characters that you've put up on screen. Either they're too perfect, because they can't show any negative things about those characters, and that because if you show something negative about a black character on screen, well, people are going to have a negative opinion about that black character, so you can't show that, so they have to be perfect, and that's not very realistic. So there's so many ways that it fails. It just drives me crazy. So that is why it's a good idea that they've gotten rid of diversity, equity, inclusion. I probably rambled too much about it, but I hope my ideas come across. And it's not that I'm against any group. It really isn't. I really just want them to make good movies with good stories. I don't need to see myself reflected on screen. I don't need diversity for diversity's sake. I just want good stories. Simple as that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I don't get a whole bunch of unsubs just because I handled a very sensitive topic. And if you give me your feedback. I don't know. I always like hearing people's feedback. So yeah, just put it in the comments below. And if you have a question for me for next week, ask me. I'll answer it, and I'll take the backlash that I always get. That's really why I don't like handling these political questions, because every time I talk about woke or DEI or anything like that, my channel gets dramatically hit by the Google algorithm. They actually they shadow ban my channel. It's brutal. It's like for about 2 weeks, I won't get any subs. I'll lose subs, and I could put the best content ever during those 2 weeks, and it doesn't matter. I will lose subs. I will get shadow banned where nobody views my videos, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating. Like that's another thing I don't like about DEI, that there's this censorship about anyone that has a differing opinion, even though differing opinions is what allows people to grow, like learning from each other. Like even if I don't agree with them, I like to hear other opinions, because I can say, hey, maybe they got a point there. Like very basic stuff. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.